Hello friends, my name is Theo, and today in this exciting Mr. Media tutorial, we're talking about one of the most important compositing tools inside of Fusion, inside Davinci Resolve, and that is the 3D camera tracker. It allows you to do all sorts of amazing stuff, and we're going to go through all of the things that you need to know to get that amazing stuff to happen. So we're not going to make anything sexy at the end of this tutorial, but you're going to know how to make sexy stuff using the camera tracker. So inside Fusion, we've got a clip loaded in, just really simple, Amber in the woods, just spinning around, and it's got some good stuff to track, and it's got some bad stuff to track. So we'll have a good little time exploring the tools. So the first thing we'll do is add in the camera tracker. Right there, drop it in, shift drag, and there we go. So we're getting a image input here, and as this is the image that we will track. Above it we've got a input for a mask, which we'll use later on. And then we've got these two outputs. The first is a 2D image output that you can see right here. It's what we're monitoring now in our media out. And we've also got this 3D scene output, which if we put a merge 3D in now and pipe this in, you can see that we've got a camera and an image plane, but the camera doesn't move because we haven't tracked it yet. So inside our camera tracker, the first tab we have in our inspector is the track tab. So we've got auto track, reset, and then preview auto track locations is the first thing I'm going to do. You see, pop that on. All these little green dots appear, and these are places that Fusion is going to look at and try and follow it throughout the frame. So like this would be a good one over here, this little black dot. It's going to look at that and try and follow it throughout the entire frame. So you've got a good few tracks on here now, but if we can change the detection threshold and the feature separation. The detection threshold determines the sensitivity of the features that Fusion will detect. So basically how high contrast the points need to be before it decides it is a tracking point. And then feature separation is how far apart these are going to be. So you can see these are pretty evenly spaced right now. But if we bring this down, we get more and more points. So the more you have on here, the most likely better your track will be, but also the longer it will take to track. So now you've got a bunch of points, and these will also all appear in your point cloud later on. And you'll notice around the side we don't get any points, and that's because most likely those are going to go out of frame sometime soon. And that size is determined by your gutter size. If you bring this up, see that point moves in. If you bring it down, so if it's a shot that doesn't move around a lot, you can bring the gutter size down. And then you get some more points. So leave it about there. We'll call that good. Now we've got the channel to track. We've got luminance, red, green, blue. You normally leave it at Luma, but if you've got a particularly noisy channel like blue, or if your green channel looks really good, something. So we can go through and test these with red. Red's pretty, decent. Green and blue. So actually the blue channel seems like a pretty good one to track. So maybe we will just go ahead and change this from Luma to blue. And you can see it's repopulated our track markers. We still have got a bunch there. Then we can also go to our new track defaults, and we can change our tracker around. We've got the Fusion tracker, we've got optical flow, and we've got planar. So whichever one you think is best. The Fusion tracker is a pattern recognition tracker, so it will find it's sort of more how your eyes would work with that. The optical flow tracker I like a lot. I think it works really well. And that follows the change in pixel values. It's a very interesting subject to read up on how optical flow works. The planar tracker is a lot like the Fusion tracker, since they're both pattern recognition trackers. But the planar tracker will actually be able to warp the pattern over time with various different sort of transformations that can fit. These all probably deserve their own different video. We'll keep it on the Fusion tracker now. We might try something later for something different. So we've got the pattern size, which is how big of an area it's looking at. We've got the solve weight, which you won't need to touch normally. That's more of an advanced feature. We won't really get into in this tutorial, sort of its own thing of different solve weights for stuff. And then the auto track defaults. This isn't something you normally need to touch. We can change our track prefix to, track 1. We can change the color around, but I like all this stuff. So now we're ready to auto track. And some of you are thinking, don't do that yet, but we're going to get into that later. So we'll auto track this real quick. And you can see an issue is we're getting these track points on Amber, and Amber is not going to give us very good 3D data because she's moving different to the camera. So what we're going to do is just hit escape to stop this. So yes, Do a quick save since we're still in beta. And now we can use this mask input. So just put a little rectangle mask up here, and we'll drag it over top of amber, and we'll make a pretty loose selection because we're not worried too much about things here. So that's there. We'll bring the width down and height down. And we'll keyframe all three of these. We'll go to the end and we'll replace it. There, we can even make it a little bit smaller. We'll go back to the beginning. There, play through. Make sure she stays inside the box the entire time, because we don't want little errors in our track. That would be a tragedy. Give it a little more there. And make sure that it stays good. Yep, that's looking pretty nice. So now if we go back to viewing our camera tracker, and we hit reset, and if we auto track again, you can see that we need to invert this mask. So escape, go back to our mask, invert, reset, auto track, and now so we've got this nice big hole where amber is. So we're only getting this nice 3D data from the scene. You can see that all of these are looking pretty nice and smooth. So you want to make sure that things aren't jumping around. You see this is going a little bit slow because we've got so many tracking markers, but you know what they say, you only live once, so what the heck? We'll put a lot of tracking markers in, and you get to see this in fast forwarded time because this is a tutorial and no one wants to wait through all of this. And now you see it's starting to track backwards, and that is in this bidirectional tracking thing. So what this does is it will look at the tracks that it's already found and then take those and extend them backwards. It might have picked up the track at frame, we'll say 10, but it was good back till frame 5, so it can still keep tracking back before that. So this will give you a more accurate solve. It'll obviously take longer since it's got to track twice, but I'd always recommend just keeping it on. And you'll notice my screen just jumped a little bit, and that's because it had a little crash in Fusion. But an interesting thing to see is to notice that the 3D tracker is only single threaded, so that can be part of the reason why it's going a little bit slower. So, if you've got a dual core processor at 7 gigahertz, give the tracker a try. But maybe one of these days, I know it's hard to multi-thread stuff, so this is not me complaining. But it is potential that those really smart people over at Blackmagic will increase the speed of this by potentially 32 times. So now this is done tracking. Everything is looking peachy keen, rocking and rolling. We'll go over to our next tab, and this is our camera tab. So we've got refine focal length, refine center point, refine lens parameters. Refine center point, you don't have to worry about unless you're using a really weird cinema lens or potentially a tilt shift lens. Refine lens parameters will auto do some distortion stuff for you. But what I like to do is put in my own lens distortion beforehand and correct the distortion. So this will require us to track again. But, we're just going through one thing at a time, and I'll cut out the tracking this time. So we sort of have to do this by eye, and we'll get this to where it's feeling a little bit less squishy or stretchy. And whenever you do it this way, then you can always reapply the lens distortion afterwards. So make sure that this is the correct thing here. And now if we Control C and Control V, you can redistort it back. So now any 3D compositing that we do will be redistorted back, which will give you that extra little bit of realism. So now I'm going to retrack this camera again, but you don't have to see that. All right, now we're tracked again and we're looking good. So over in our camera tab, you can check this refine lens parameters if you want to, but I haven't gotten amazing results with it, so I've always just undistorted before tracking. So that's the way I do it. Do it however you want. Refine focal length. It should do this automatically. It doesn't update the number here, so that makes me a little wary. But in theory, it should find the focal length of your camera. I'm just going to type in 11 because I know this was shot on 11mm lens. Film gate, we've got our automatic ones here. So this was Blackmagic Ursa Mini 4.6K. Drop that on there. If your camera isn't in the preset pull down, then you can type in your aperture manually here. And just remember that it's in inches, so that's why you get these weird numbers. So lots of times they'll be on the internet if you look it up in millimeters, so just convert that to inches. Calculators on the internet for free, they can do that for you. All this other stuff is pretty much just good to go. If you're doing lens stuff, then there are a couple different things you can choose from. There's radial and tangential. Radial will only solve for the lens curvature, which is, totally fine for most of the stuff you're doing. But if you have a little bit of skew, funny stuff, then you can do radial and tangential. But we can actually leave this to none now because we've done our own lens distortion. So all of these are set and good to go. We can hop over to our Solve tab, and this is where there's another exciting one. The camera one's not that exciting. Tracker is pretty exciting. Solve, pretty exciting. Just in case you were wondering which ones were exciting and which ones weren't. Track filtering is where a lot of the good stuff is going to happen. So this is a little bit backwards in my mind, but what it does is it selects everything, and then you can choose to discard stuff from there. So first, what do these three sliders do? The minimum track length selection is how many frames a track has to stay being tracked for before Fusion throws it out. Because if something's only on the screen for one frame, it's not going to give you very much depth data. But the longer you make this, the better it's going to be. So this will do is select all of the tracking points with 6 frames or less. So here we've got all these tracks that are selected, and those are the yellow ones. So you see, it's good that we did a lot of points because a lot of them are being thrown out. Then we've got our maximum track error. So all the errors above this are being selected. So the lower it is, the more tracks will be selected, and then the ones left over will be the really good tracks. So what we're doing is selecting all of the bad tracks. You just bring this down a little bit. And so you've still got a good few blue ones left in here. Just bring it down. It's looking pretty good. And then maximum solve error is the same sort of thing. So bringing this down, selecting all the solve errors above this amount. See, it's really not selecting that many. And you might think, Theo, why don't you bring these all the way down? Well, then you're going to run out of tracks. So this is looking pretty good. So what we can do now that we have all of these suboptimal tracks selected is go and set their solve weight down to 0. So we'll still get these in the point cloud, but now whenever we solve, we're only getting these best of the best, creme de la creme tracks. So we'll go ahead and hit solve. And now you can see our solve error is 0.15 pixels, which is pretty good. I mean, it's really good. Like, that's very acceptable. Anything below 1 is normally fine. Between 0.8 and 0.6 is really good. Below 0.2 is considered like pretty good. So we've got a good little track here. Another thing to know is we've got this auto select seed frame control, which can only just be left on unless you have some really specific shots. Seed frames are reference images that are used to initialize the solve process. So it's basically 2 frames that are pretty similar, but that have similar tracks but are far apart, and then the solve can interpolate between the two. It's not something you really need to worry about too much unless you have really specific weird shots. If there's like some weird reflections going on, or there's lighting changes, or like camera shake, that's when you need to worry about seed frames more. But for most shots, you don't need to worry about seed frames. You just leave it on auto. And lots of times with solves, you have to go and redo things, and maybe even have to retrack stuff. So like you might want to select, tracks with longer tracks. So we can do the same thing here, set the weight to 1 and solve. Let's see if we can beat our 0.15 pixels, which we don't need to beat, but could we get it to 0.1? Could we get it to below 0.1? 0.2. So you see, that didn't do as good. Just hit Control Z sum, back to 6, invert, set these to 1, and we will resolve. So that's why you don't always just max out the sliders, is because sometimes it can bite you in the butt and give you a less good track. So it's really a lot of playing around, clicking a bunch. And then I'm sure once you do this for a lot, you'll start to get a feel for, what works and what doesn't. There we go. Back to 0.15. We'll call that good. Now in the next tab, this is our export tab, and this is very cool. So if we go and look at our Merge 3D node now, from our camera tracker, you see we've got our solved camera in the scene. Whoop. So we've got our huge point cloud here, which a lot of these are set the weight to 0. So if you look down in this little gray box, I can't point to it because the pointer is a thing, but you see the solve weight is 0. If we go to one of these other ones, the solve weight is 1. So we've got all of these good reference points to look at whenever we're placing stuff in our scene. So if we go and we view our camera, you can see we've got all these things to look at. You can say we want to put something at these trees. We've got the points. So we'll go back to actually we'll stay in the camera view for now. So we've got our 3D scene transform, which if you leave it to aligned, that's normally totally fine. But if you need to tweak things around, you can change it to unaligned, and you can change whatever you want. But I'm going to keep it at aligned, and then we'll just transform our ground plane. So we show in viewer, so we've got our ground plane right here, and that's not the ground. This is the ground down here. So we'll just go ahead and offset the ground plane. Ooh, you see it's moving pretty fast there. And that's looking better. Let's make this brighter. And that's looking pretty good. If we bring up another view of this Merge 3D and we change the view to perspective, you can see that actually what looks good isn't quite good enough yet. So we'll bring this ground plane down until it is where our ground is. And I'll switch this to front and bring this all the way down to the ground. And that feels about right. Yeah, that looks like the ground. If we play through, yeah, that seems to stick pretty well. Look at that. Good job. So I'll do a quick little save. Then we go to our export options, and we just choose we want to export everything. So camera, point cloud, ground plane, a renderer, the animated camera, and the image plane, which is our image here to reference. So we go ahead and hit export. You can see we get all these nodes broken out here, which is really handy. And I didn't know that this export thing was an option at first. So I used to do everything in the camera tracker tab. That's bad news. Don't do that. Export it. So now we've got our camera, we've got our point cloud, got our ground plane, all coming into a merge with a renderer. And this into the lens distortion input. I was just right clicking and dragging to get that little menu to make it easier. Got that. Now say we're playing around and everything's looking good. We're adding some 3D text. Something that says Shrek, because Shrek's a meme, right? The meme's probably already dead by the time I post this tutorial. Sorry, everyone. Sorry. I'll go ahead and view this in our media out over here. Shrek. We'll make it green-ish, like Shrek. And we'll go to our Merge 3D over here. And we'll set this on the ground plane. Whoop, not that. I want to edit Shrek. Set it about on the ground. We play it through. Look at that. Nice and sticky. But say, we think we could make this track a little better. Like maybe we just watched this tutorial and we know some better ways to get a better solve. What you can do is go back to your camera. And let's say you want to move the ground plane around a little bit, or, you've got a better solve, whatever. You can go to update previous export and it will change all your stuff. So we just move this ground plane around, or we'll make it red. Update previous export. And I see our ground plane is red. Excellent. Over here are just some general options for how things look. So how many frames the trail is displayed, the locator size, the different track colors. So if you want your selection to be, white instead, and new tracks are fuchsia, and then the solve error gradient green is good, but it doesn't go to yellow, it goes to red. And then this is just all aesthetic stuff you don't really need to worry too much about. But it's fun, and this is, sort of everything that you need to know about the camera tracker to get started. Another good thing I like is this Darken Image. So if we go back to view our camera tracker in 1, so you've got Darken Image, and now you can see your tracks a little bit better. Very cool. But aside from that, you now know how to make just the coolest 3D tracked stuff. So I hope that helped out. Oh, quick addendum. If you want to select tracks, besides just using the little sliders, like maybe a bird flies across the frame, you didn't see it, you can use these tools over here. So delete selected tracks, trim frame controls. You can do select tracks by names if you have several different tracks that you've tried. Rename selected tracks, toggle the display name. So if you just want to display the name of like this one and this one, boop, got some tracks there. You can turn those off. Same thing with the frame range and the solve error. And you just make them so you don't see the tracks, just the lines. See nothing, just the tracks, the lines. This is you can see how big the patterns are. There's just a bunch of cool stuff in here. This is a little addendum. See the locators. This is the preview new tracks, just like we had in this section. You can color certain tracks, certain colors. So if there's like a building that you want to, or a sign, you want to make those just really obvious whenever you come back into 3D. And then there's the Darken Image control again. So there you go. Just a little boring overview of some of these tools. I didn't know they were there the first time that I used. I just wanted to point those out, read through the names, so you know they're there. Very handy when if you're doing more complicated shots than this. The shot was, a pretty, I think this is like a pretty standard, like nothing too special 3D track shot. It worked well. I think the track's pretty nice and sticky. Let's just play through. We're rocking and rolling. So anyway, hope you liked this little tutorial. If you like, give it a like. If you didn't, give it a dislike. No matter what, leave your feelings down in the comments below. Let me know what you feel about these more in-depth, sort of dry tutorials. I thought this one was good because camera tracker is such an important thing, and it's really easy to just hit auto track and go and say, that's good enough. But getting really solid tracks is a really important thing. And a little lens distortion tip I think is pretty good. So like if we put Shrek over to the side of the frame, you see it gets a little bit distorty here, which I think helps sell the effect a lot really well. So that's a good little Theo pro tip. But anyway, back to the spiel. Like, subscribe, etc. Thunder outside. Maybe you heard that. Maybe you didn't. That will complicate some things this afternoon, but you don't care about that. Go over to meesmedia.com/products. Check out the cool stuff we've got there. Light leaks. I used to use the light leaks pack this morning for something, because I got a bunch of really average looking stock footage and it needed to be bumped up. So we put some light leaks over top of it, and the client was like, oh, that's cool. So that's a good thing to check out. LUTs are cool. All the color grading people, they like the LUTs. Makes stuff easy, fast, fun, all those buzzwords. I've been rambling on long enough. Once again, I've been Theo with Media. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you next time. Bye.